postings go. Job postings, we'll go over that first. A lot of jobs posted in the last week since you guys have been here. So let's go over that. Let's see. I'm going to go right into the first one, which is internship needed. Local company is needing a intern to set up a ERP system for basically parts for manufacturing firm. Intro IT skills needed. They'll train you what to do. And you can email Chris at chrisekstromcarlson.com if you're interested. It's $15 an hour. And part-time right now, but could work into full-time if you like it and they like you and all the good stuff. Second one is 8 job openings at Mid-States Concrete. 3 intern positions are open at Mid-States for modeling and programming. And the modeling is for AutoCAD modeling and programming. They will teach both. If you have no clue what either one is, they will teach you how to use it. They're just basically needing some data entry and documentation stuff. The 2 structural engineers, project designers, and project detailer, those will be for students currently in AutoCAD. So if you know students that are in AutoCAD or you're in AutoCAD, probably a good idea to apply. That's the most job openings I've seen a job site post in the years I've been doing this, so that's pretty awesome. And they're wanting all of our students to fill those positions. They're wanting only Rock Valley College students, so that's pretty cool. So if you know somebody that's into AutoCAD or is taking AutoCAD, again, they will pay quite well for an intro position, anywhere from $15 to $25 an hour, starting out, with benefits. The next here is Rock River Valley Reclamation District. They've not got back with me yet, so I'm assuming it's still open. They had a position open for temporary IT, for troubleshooter, help desk person, general computer person that can be hands-on and hold their ground when people are gone on vacation and stuff like that. $15 an hour, hours 8 to 4:30. And pay rate $15 an hour. And then Lori Collins is a contact person there. And if you do contact any of these and they say it's filled, let me know. They're supposed to tell me, but sometimes they don't. So there's more, by the way. If you click the view more, there's more available. Here you go. And as far as other items of interest, we do have, and it's posted around campus right now, it's going to be April 27th. Interested in computers, programming, data security, networking, web development. It's 1 hour on April 27th, and it's for if you're interested in going on to a 4-year college. Once you leave here, there'll be faculty and advisors from Rockford University and NIU, as well as alumni of RVC to answer questions you might have. It's just for 1 hour, so I'm hoping students go to that, but that's going to be tough, I think. Thursday for 1 hour from 2 to 3. It's kind of a tough time slot. But anyway, if you are familiar or if you are interested or know somebody who might be interested in IT or computer science, data security, probably a good idea to go to that. And I do have some cards, by the way, up here when you leave if you want to take one to remind you or give it to people possibly. I'm hoping to get folks in there, and I know 1 hour is kind of tough, especially on that day. March 30th, they changed the name, Barnes & Noble, from the name it was, which was the Maker Faire, Mini Maker Faire, because they didn't pay for the licensing of Mini Maker Faire for the next year. So they changed the name to Collaborating Code, is what we're calling it. And it's going to be Thursday, 2 weeks from tonight. The 2 weeks from tonight, we'll talk about in a second, is going to be your time to begin your research paper. But it's going to be at Barnes & Noble on Cherryville Mall. If you're familiar with Barnes & Noble, it's going to be in the music area where the vinyl is, which they do sell vinyl now. So it's going to be there, a couple tables. And I've got like 5 or 6 CIS students helping. And so appreciate you helping on that. That's great. 6 to 9, and I believe it'll be packed for one reason. I know it's spring break week, but I don't know if you heard in the news, the mall instituted a new rule. The kids can't be in the mall past 4:30 on Friday, Saturday night without parental or guardianship. So what that means is Monday through Thursday, that mall is going to be cram-packed because it's going to be concrete babysitter for 4 days, basically. I was talking to somebody earlier about that today. You know, there is tons of stuff around there kids can do, but parents have to pay money, like the trampoline place. Our grandson's been there. It's a lot of fun. The bowling alley. And I believe Volcano Falls just opened up this week full time. So, you know, I'll have to take them somewhere that actually have to pay money, but I think it's a good deal. Or maybe, you know, a novel idea, maybe spend time with the kids. Maybe do something together as a family. That's an idea. So anyway, we're looking, I think they said something like 400 to 500 kids is what have already said they were going to come. And they contact the local school districts to figure out that number. So, again, they're going to be really busy. I am feeding the students that are coming. They're getting a robot as well, if they don't already have one. And we're going over desks of the robot will be involved. Kids will drive that around. Little bits, that's kind of cool. It's these, I won't be doing that one, but it's these little electronic components that are switches. So when you connect them together, it teaches light switches and, you know, what happens when you do a positive and negative and stuff like that. It's all battery operated. My grandson, when he saw a few times back they had it, he spent like an hour just in the little bits area. They're pretty expensive, but pretty cool. Lego, Megaformers, Ozobot will be there. We'll do, instead of the hour of code, we're going to do the minute of code. We're going to do minute of code. And on the Ozobot, what we're going to do is take butcher block paper on the floor there in the music area, show kids how to do it, how to get Ozobot to follow a line, and then let them start just draw their own map, basically, for Ozobot. So that'll be a lot of fun. And so anyway, tell folks about it. If you haven't already shared this on Twitter and Facebook, definitely do that. That would be much appreciated. Registration is a good one. Register for summer starts March 28th, I believe. March 28th. This is a little slideshow of the courses we're offering, and you can avail yourself to that. It's kind of interactive, something less boring than just a page with letters and text on it. And so avail yourself to read that, find out more about the courses we're offering. And then the hour of code for April. This will be the easiest one to get to. So let's see here. Oh, forgot. Hack Nights, March 22nd. That's next Wednesday from 6 to 7 in this room. There will be presenting that night a gentleman, 73 years old, put together a robot kit. He's going to show what he did. He's pretty excited. And then one former student, one high school student here is going to show us a program they've been working on the last year and a half together. The high schooler had been taking C++ in high school, kind of teaching himself. But he's also like a audio genius when it comes to putting together audio. If you like techno music, he kind of puts techno music together. And so they're putting techno music in this game that Brandon White, an alumni of our programming classes, who works for Ebates, is helping him with the programming side. And he's teaching Brandon techno music and what that's all about. I guess one of the YouTube videos a kid put on YouTube of one of his orchestrated techno music had like about 50,000 hits or something. So a lot of people have been using his music. So that's kind of cool. And he's, I think in 11th grade, he'll be a senior in the fall, something like that. And then next hour of code is April 5th at the RVC downtown location. If you've not been there, you've got 2 more opportunities to go to the hour of code. April 5th and May 3rd is the next 2 dates. I'm going to take a break in June and July and start back up in August. But the downtown location is really nice. It's the second floor of the R Star building, and we offer quite a few classes there. I think I might be teaching iOS mobile app development course there in the future, I guess. So anyway, that's what's coming up. This week, week 9, we're going to be covering chapter 9 on some networking. We're actually going over networking protocols as it refers to IT and communication, and specifically different operating systems. Week 10 next week is virtual, some more virtual VNC stuff in class. Tonight, after we get through the discussion, you'll be taking on the subnet exercise. I'll help you with the first couple sheets, which is super duper easy to do. I'll show you how to do the first couple. And then you'll bring this back next week, hard copy, next Thursday. Week 11, let's talk about that, which is 2 weeks from tonight, the 30th, where I'll be at Barnes. And the reason I'm dressed up, by the way, Andrew already asked, is I had to host some folks from Japan today, so I had to kind of dress up a little bit. And, you know, if you've ever worked or been in meetings with folks from Japan, you have to certain customs that they have. One of them is customary to transfer business cards when you first meet, and then give a gift. And so we transfer business cards, and we gave them a gift of a gift bag full of Cubby stuff. And so they kind of like that. So a lot of fun. So let's see here. Get to that. There we go. Download for me. Load. Thinking about it. Anyway, while this is loading, I'll tell you what you're going to be doing. There's a presentation I put together for 2 weeks from tonight on how to create an outline. No face-to-face. You're on your own. You don't have to come to campus. You can do this at home. You do need to submit something at the end of the night, and I'll go over that real quick here. But the reason I do this is twofold. Generally, once a semester around this time, I generally have some type of event that I'm a part of or meeting, or I'm out of town for some conference. So over the years, I've always used it for, one year I was actually in Vegas at a conference, and we did a live stream on the Strip during our conference, and students got to ask people in the group some questions and stuff, so it was kind of fun. And that was actually right when video conferencing came on the scene, because it was pretty choppy, but the kids thought it was pretty cool. So you'll watch a little podcast about, it's actually a Prezi, on how to put together an outline. I'll give you my perspective over the years of creating an outline. It's probably definitely not the only perspective. It's just my personal perspective on how to create an outline. Because, you know, for years, our English teachers taught us, you know, first thing when you do a research paper is you got to give them what? An outline, right? There's a purpose for that. One of the reasons is if you don't have an outline, it's just kind of like, you know, chasing rabbit trails all over the place when you're researching. So outlines help you kind of stay focused on what to research, so I'll help you with that. So the goal for that night, 2 weeks from tonight, is for sure to create an outline for sure of what your research paper is going to be. Because a few weeks after that, you'll actually be presenting your presentation, believe it or not. So it'll come by pretty quick. So on the question, what did you accomplish for your research paper presentation? For everybody, I'd like to hear at least I began my outline or completed my outline. I think when I walk you through mine, I give you like an example of how to set up a secure Wi-Fi network at home and give you like 6 steps. And from those 6 steps, I show how you can break it up into an outline for a research paper and talk about that. So you'll submit that at the end of the night. Questions about that? Again, mark on the calendar 2 weeks from tonight. Do not come to class. You'll be doing this. If you do come to class, the door will be locked. And so you can come to campus. I have told students in the past, if you need to come to campus to work, because especially if you have little kids at home, just come to campus like you normally would. Go in a computer lab or something and knock out the outline. There you go. You can bring your headsets to listen to the Prezi. Questions on that? Okay. All right. So we're going to talk tonight about characteristics of network operating system, and specifically the word NOS, network operating system, which I think is kind of a cool name. NOS kind of reminds me of like nitrogen oxide. When I was a kid going through high school, I had a friend of mine, we were into auto body, and he had a 67 and 68 Camaro, which was like sweet cars. They're like awesome cars. He had one that was, the 68 he actually drove all the time. It was jet black, but the 67 he kept in an airtight garage and would show it. And in the 67 he actually had nitrous oxide in the back, in the trunk. And we would take it out sometimes, like we had a friend that had a Speedway, and we would take it out, and when you hit that nitrous switch, it was like going from 30, 40, say you're going 30, 40 miles an hour. As soon as you hit the switch and it had a 350 big block, it would go from 30, 40 miles an hour to like 120 like that. And it was crazy. But when I think of NOS, I think of nitrogen oxide. And so, and you might too now, maybe when you think of it. So, but it stands for Network Operating System, which is definitely different. By now you should know a networking operating system is different than a client operating system, just in the nature of what it does, which it controls and manages other clients that are connected to it for authentication, sharing data, security, on who can see what, who can get into what, things like that. So we'll talk about that here in just a second. Get right into that. So a network operating system and server, networks use servers to exceed minimum hardware. We talked about, a number of times the fact that when a network operating system or any operating system on the box or on the CD or DVD, it'll give you minimal requirements of how much memory, what's a processor you need. You generally always exceed that when you're in production because, like for instance, I think the minimal requirement for today's network operating system for Microsoft is like 12 gigs memory or 8 gigs memory. Normally you're going to run on 24 gigs roughly on most servers for memory. And so it's not optimal, it's minimal that the Microsoft gives you. So to determine optimal requirements, a number of factions come in. So first is what kind of applications you're going to run. Some applications that servers run are like Microsoft Exchange for email. It would be one example. Email filters is another example. Websites could be another example. Citrix for VPN. Cisco could be another example. There are some servers that literally push applications out to the clients, like Microsoft Office and things of that nature. How many clients will connect to your server? That's a big factor as well. 50 versus 500 is a big difference as far as what you're supporting. How much storage space you're going to need for every user. Some networking folks decide each user is going to get, say, 100 megs. Some networking folks, it's unlimited on what space you get. Again, it depends upon your needs and your environment. Like we talked about, one of the jobs is AutoCAD. An average AutoCAD file is averagely between 1 and 2 gigs. That's a small one. That's like a base AutoCAD file. And so you definitely wouldn't want a user network program, a user file for a user to be like 100 megs. It's not going to work. And so you got to give them much more space. How much downtime is needed or is acceptable to install a new server, and what can the organization afford? Generally, that bottom one would be to the top, okay? And the way I've done in the past, just so you know, when it comes to servers or new servers, is do all the due diligence on what you need, how many people's connected, and put together a PowerPoint to the finance folks to sell what you're wanting. And normally if you do that, if they have the money, you normally get it. If you just say, I need $50,000 for a new server, you're not going to get it. But if you say, I need it because of this, and this, and this, and these are the reasons why, normally you can get it if you make your argument. And when I say $50,000, some of you are like, whoa, that's a lot of money. Well, that's about average, $30,000 to $50,000 for a beefed up, well-supported, server for, say, 150, 200, 300 employees. Because you're talking not only server and the software and the hardware, but the licensing, maintenance of the licensing, all that good stuff. Pretty expensive once you add all this stuff up. So determining, also going on with determining application types of application that you're going to be using, how much resources are going to be used, the vendor reputation requirements, just talking about what type of vendors are you going to be using. Are you going to be using vendors natively or third party? What that means is, like the ERP system we talked about, the job opening for that ERP system. There's a lot of ERP systems in the nation, and some of them will do just selling of the ERP system and then no installation. And then there's whole companies that all they do is support installing these ERP systems. That's all they do. And there's literally tons of vendors. Epicore's a big vendor for ERP, and Epicore is probably, I would say, just in Illinois alone, has probably about 8 to 10 large firms, and all they do is install Epicore and support Epicore. There's user groups in Illinois of 200 to 300 people per group. So it's just a big software. And they have mixed reputation depending on the version you're at. If you have a new version, it's pretty good. If you have an old version, not so much, because they want you to go to new version. And so vendors have requirements. So, like for instance, what quality of work do they do? How dependable? What's their technical support like? And really, the only way around, there's no other way around it than just experience. And so when you're first starting in IT, you're not going to know what good a vendor is, whether it's good or not. And a lot of times you just have to ask around to people that you know and trust that have been in the field for a while and can help you out. A reliable server. Spend as much as you can. I always try to look ahead about 5 years from where we are now. So if we're going to get in 5 years 50 new employees, I put that in the report, and what I think we're going to need for new computers that are connected to it, new resources, upgrade to software, and stuff like that. On reliability, it mentions here component failure, widespread effects, meaning you don't want to get cheap on servers, because when it comes to server hardware, they're on all the time. And so it needs to be quality hardware, quality software, both. So one of the important parts of as far as support goes on the network operating system is that the NOS has efficient communication, allows efficient communication to the network, and it has resource sharing, which you've learned. Some of the tasks that NOS does for you, it helps you do, is creating, managing client accounts. I think it's week 11 we do client creation. Allowing clients to share resources, managing clients' access along resource sharing, and that could be both web sharing, folder sharing, simple folder sharing. And what's big now for companies is to have their own like Dropbox on site. You guys are familiar with like Dropbox.com, right? Like it's in the cloud. Well, as you can imagine, most IT managers aren't real comfortable on storing data, 100% of data in a cloud, right? So you get these appliances now that you can host on site that are, terabytes in size, 5, 10 terabytes devices, that you basically host your own Dropbox. And there's actually open source software that allows you to do that. And you guys can even download open source software at home to work on your computer and play with it. But one of the big things today, or big buzzwords, is cloud sharing. Everybody's doing it. It's not a term. It's not a fact of are we going to support it. It's a fact of how we're going to support it in IT now, because everybody, including CEOs, everybody that comes into your workplace, is all doing cloud, whether it be Dropbox, Google, Amazon. That's the way it's going. So a lot of folks, a lot of IT firms will have departments will have a hosted site hardware appliance somewhere on site, and if they do have it on the cloud, it's mirrored, meaning everything that's local is mirrored on the cloud, and vice versa. So if the cloud gets hung up or crashes, what can happen, or the local gets crashed, or it's lost or gets corrupt, you can restore from one of the two. One of the other services that servers do, and you do this every day, when you logged in today you did it, is logging in to the server to get resources for authentication. And in that resource piece for logging in, most IT departments don't use this, but you can limit the time and day that people access your server. Why do you think that's important? Or what type of facilities do you think it would be important to limit time and day of access? What do you guys think? There's a number of different scenarios probably, but what's one scenario you can think of where you'd probably want to limit access? Yeah.
So for the company that I work for, on month-end close, they shut off the server so you can't get into the system so they can update and roll forward to the next month.
There you go. So nobody goes in and tampers or makes any changes. So that's definitely a good example. Anything else you can think of? Companies that maybe on an ongoing basis limit logins from certain times. And why would they do that, you think?
Military.
Huh?
Military.
Military definitely does that, yeah. All military facilities, governmental facilities will definitely, that's pretty de facto set up in those type of facilities. It's a very easy security thing to set up, and it's built into the network operating system. Microsoft, Linux, all has a Mac, to where you can literally, it's a drag and drop scenario in the operating system, network operating system, and Active Directory, where you can say, I want all users or these users to have only this amount of time through the week to access the network, and any other time they can't get in. So login process, redirector determines things of where to redirect coming through, like say the server or even a router. You can also have redirection interceptions on a server base as well. Meaning, if you have a website and it comes through your server from a certain IP address, a certain external IP address, it can redirect it to other resources for folks to access folders, files, whatever the case may be. For the public to access public folders and download things as well. File access protocol, Windows XP client communication up to Windows 10 now today. Two types of file access protocol, CIFS, Common Internet File Services, and older protocol, SMB, Server Message Block. This basically is a broad support allowing every type of client to authenticate to access resources. And the clients can be mobile, laptop, desktop, tablets, can be able to access files regardless of what their operating system is. It could be a Windows phone, Linux phone, iOS, Linux MacBook, whatever. They should be able to get in and access any of the files. Now, they might not be able to write sometimes to files, but they'll be able to access files on the network. Now, here's an example of a redirect, a client connecting to a network operating system. And notice it says here, is this request for the server? Yes or no. And if it's no, yes, it goes to the server. If it's no, it goes back to the client and allows them to do whatever function it is that they need to do. Middleware. This is a things in between the server and client, and there's companies that actually focus on middleware. Cisco's one of them. It's a middleware company. And so any device that's in between server and client is a middleware device, which would be switches, routers, hubs, things of that nature. Three-tier architecture is where you have the client-server environment incorporating middleware. So up to this point, we've talked about client-server, but that middleware piece is a very vital piece, because without middleware, we wouldn't be able to communicate. And so middleware could also be at home, would be like a Wi-Fi router, that would be considered middleware. So anything that's in between you and the server would be considered middleware. So here we have an example here of the server OS and NOS there on the right, multiple clients on the left, and multiple middlewares in the middle. So if we use your home as an example, say you have a couple Windows laptops and a desktop and some mobile phones, and on the right is your server that's connected to. The middleware would be like your Wi-Fi router, your hubs, your printers, things that you transmit data through one another. And so middleware is very important on a client-server architecture. Next in the line is user and groups. And we'll be doing this in week 11, where you go in, one of the common tasks for IT and networking is to create and manage users. So you're doing that, depending on your business, it can be a lot or not so much. But it's going to be done sometime in your as a network admin. And what happens when people leave? There's certain protocols to come into play there when people get hired. So after NOS client authentication, the client gains access to the services and resources of the network operating system. These are generally added and configured in the Active Directory within the Windows operating system for server network operating system, NOS. And you can tell the network operating system through Active Directory what rights and privileges each group or individual gets. Generally what happens is you create groups. Like an example would be if this room here was a company and this over here was sales and you guys were marketing, sales would have certain access to folders and rights to certain folders and printers, and marketing would have rights to certain folders and printers. We can even eliminate, we can even go down further granular and say each group has certain rights to programs they can run and not run, or install programs or not install programs, or what websites you can go to. You can be real granular when it comes to Active Directory. The administrator account on network operating system is the most privileged user, meaning they should be able to do anything and everything, both on the server and on the clients they log into. They have unlimited rights to the server, unlimited rights to the domain, objects and resources, created by default, which makes sense because if you don't have an admin, it's kind of like the key to the system. You're not going to be able to configure anything. Root is the name of the user on Unix and Linux systems. That's the name it's used, is root, instead of admin. Like on Windows operating system, it's always admin or administrator. Usernames. Network operating system grants each network user access to files and other shared resources. And again, this is according to the IT manifest as far as what group gets what access to what. The groups are generally looked at upon as like buckets. So if I have this group here being my marketing and sales and marketing, 2 buckets, and as employees are added, they're added into the bucket. If they're removed, they're taken out of the bucket, or they transfer, taken from one bucket to the next bucket. But Active Directory, basically, you configure the bucket, and then anyone you add or take out gets those rights or privileges you've configured for that bucket, basically. Does that make sense? So you got security rights for the bucket, for the group, and you don't have to configure anyone individually. You can just, as you add a user into a group in Active Directory, they automatically get the rights and privileges for that group. Example I gave here was network administrator for public elementary school would have different rights on a group than, say, teachers in a public elementary school, or administrators, or principals, or counselors, or whomever. You go down the line. We're going to have certain rights and privileges different. So here's some groups and user groups broken down by rights and privileges scenarios. So you've got teachers, and they have rights to programs to read and modify, rights to grade, full control, rights to staff, no access. Students can read programs, no access to grades, no access to staff. Administrators, no access to programs, read and modify grades, and full control to staff. Generally, as an administrator, you don't deal with software on a system for like I'm talking about server software. When you go to most servers, when you fire up Internet Explorer, it's the welcome page because it's never used. And that's for a reason, because, well, one reason is, anytime you access the internet, you are, regardless of what the antivirus you have, you are opening yourself somewhat to viruses or malware or whatever, but if you never use it, it's never going to happen. And so on servers, it's generally never used as a production system, meaning software that's on that system that normal users would use, you don't use on a server, okay? And that's where it talks about no access to programs. You don't need access to programs. Not that you couldn't do it, you just don't need it. And they call that the rights of, least privilege rights. What you need, what's the least rights you need to function, basically. So nesting and group arrangement, hierarchical group arrangement, also it refers to the bucket scenario I talked about earlier. Anyone that's in the bucket gets all the rights and privileges of that group bucket. Simple management that way. If I added you to that group, you now have all the rights and privileges of marketing, all the rights and privileges of sales. It affects permissions granted to every member in that group. So you have inherited permissions. It's passed down from the parent to child group. Parent group would be the actual group name, or the group name, like marketing or sales. The child group, you can have subgroups as well. You could have subgroups. So marketing could have a group for managers, a group for folks on the road, and a group for those internal. You could do that. After the user, the group's restricted, restrictions applied. The client's allowed to share network resources. And so client to client pretty much is still driven by the client, by the person. So when you are logged into a network, granted, the network operating system and Active Directory controls your activity on the network, but when you're on a client, you control the activity that you share with your client to other people, just like you would anywhere. So you can still give people rights to folders and not rights to folders and things of that nature. You can definitely still do that. Modern NOSes allow you for organizations to add users, printers, servers, data files, and applications. That would be all network operating systems today. And when I say all, Windows, Mac, and Linux are the top 3 servers, network operating servers that you would work with. Directory, it lists the resources of a network operating system and the associations of those. And so directories would include, in a directory, objects like printers, computers, servers, switches, things of that nature. Even maybe voice over IP phones would be in there as well. Trying to think of what else. Access points would be in there as well. And in some organizations, this is now not new. It's pretty much standard. Mobile devices. I mean, there's, I think 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, 2015, yeah, so 2 years ago now. For the first time in 2015, mobile devices surpassed, and I'm talking phones and tablets, surpass the sales of laptops and desktops. They are no longer the number one, which they used to be for years. On the business, I'm talking on the business side, not consumer side. Mobile devices surpass the sales of desktop laptops in the business environment. And so even like in your workplace, I'm sure you can attest to this, all the managers, and maybe even yourself, you're daily walking around, and they're daily walking around with mobile devices for all your meetings, all your functions, everything. If you need to access something that is on a client, just like I can do here on my tablet, I can remote into TeamViewer and get access to any server or any client I need to get access to. Okay, don't really need to have it in front of me and carry it around anymore. So because of that, it's now one of the directory listings, and even the file system directory itself, as far as what type of file system that you have, whether it be Windows, Mac, or Linux type of file system. LDAP. LDAP is actually used on campus. When you guys log in to online services, Eagle, we use LDAP for everything. And what that means is Josh Kurtz is over programming here on campus, and he created our LDAP directory authentication. And I worked with Josh for a couple of years when I was IT director, and he did a great job doing this. And LDAP is open source, okay, and it works with all operating systems. And the way it works is when you log into LDAP and authenticate, you can then, once you're authenticated on that machine or that client, other entities that will use that LDAP, you don't have to re-log into those. Generally, you can just get into those systems. But once you log into LDAP, you can then access systems, servers, and in this case, network operating system. And Windows itself uses LDAP for its protocol for accessing your objects, which would be, in a user perspective, would be your files and folders and things. And LDAP is basically an object, thing, or person associated with the network. Attributes would be the properties associated with. And what's big about LDAP is the last one, schema. Schema is basically, we'll use RVC as an example. RVC is the name of our domain, okay? So to get to my username, it would be RVC dot RVCnet dot my e-number. That would be my LDAP directory. And so it starts with the server name and it works its way down basically on the schema. The schema has two types of definitions, which is the classes or the object classes identifies the type of directory it's in, and then the attributes, it stores information in that directory. Now, the one I just gave you the example was, another one you might see at your workplace. You log in with the name of your workplace / your username, right? That is an LDAP schema. But what you don't see on that login is the name of the server, possibly, but you generally do see the domain name, which is going to be usually some acronym for that company. In our case, it's RVC. Here in town, I work for Aqua Aerobic Systems. It's LOVPK because it's in the Loves Park area, so they named their domain LOVPK to refer to Love Park, the location. They have multiple locations. And so LDAP schema is real important. And one of the reasons it's important is most businesses, or some businesses, have multiple locations, right, of authentication. Like I told you guys this story, getting tired of hearing, probably is, I worked for Sears going through college, and a number of retailer places. And each one of these places were, I worked in one of many stores. And so, but I could literally go to any store if I wanted to and log in and have access. But each store had its own separate schema for logging in. So it's a way for security, for sure, but it's also a way to separate each entity for managing and maintaining integrity of that login. So here's an example of a NOS directory with a schema and some of the schema objects that could be in there. So you have the user account here, top level, we'll start there first. User account, or in the object classes, user account, computer, printer, domain. So going down on that left arrow here, object name, global, unique identifier, required attributes, optional attributes, syntax, parent relationships. Then that second box there, username, your full name, password, home directory. And then the last one, your account descriptions, and do you allow remote access? We went over remote access, I think, a couple weeks back, where your computer can say yes or no on that. So these are some of the pieces and parts that could be a part of your schema and are part of your schema. LDAP deals with what's called organizational units, or OUs. And OUs is basically the very top of a tree of a network. And so on an OU, you've got this scenario here. Right at the top of the tree is the OU, and this would be the name of the domain. RBC in this case would be the organizational unit. Underneath RBC could be multiple locations. Like for instance, I'll take this down further. I'll just use 2 boxes here to be simple. I'll put here students and faculty, all right, just to break it down. So when you log in, one of your schemas, objects, has to do with a student name, a student folder, a student access object, okay, to delineate you as a student. Same thing with faculty, delineate as a faculty. So it'll be RBC dot student dot whatever your username is as your schema, to be simple. Now there's more to it than that, but that's a simplistic view of it. So the OU is a container, and anytime you hear a container, you can add something to a container, right? You can add something to a container. It's logically divided, and each record or each user record can contain all the properties of that user, and does contain all the properties of the user. So LDAP standard is basically directories or trees. And when you think of a tree, let's start at the bottom. What do you have at the very bottom of a tree? Very bottom, first thing, under the ground. What do you got? The root, yeah. So when you think of a tree, next time, think of a network, because a network is a reverse tree. So the way a network works is the root is the beginning of a network, which on a tree, can you add to a root of a tree? Can you add, what object can be added to a root of a tree when it's first starting in the ground? The trunk, there you go. From the trunk, what can be added from a trunk on a tree? Branches, right? And from branches, what can be added? Leaves. Can anything be added to a leaf? Is leaf it? Is that it? Is that the end of a tree? The leaf? Generally, right? So let's talk about a network for a second. The root is the OU. The branches are the multiple, could be the multiple pipe there at the top here, okay? These here can be considered the branches, the different departments, students and faculty. We can add other users, by the way, in students and faculty. I can add other users into these containers because they're a container. It's a group. But once I add a user, I can't add an item to a user object. That's the true. A user would be considered a leaf on a network. Okay, groups can be added because it's a container. Leaves can't be added. So users are leaves, printers are leaves, file servers, switches, hubs are leaves because you can't add to those. Make sense? But you can add to groups. Groups can add subgroups. And so on a network, it's basically a reverse tree, starting with the root, working your way down. And you'll see anomalies and similarities and definitions of the word tree when it comes to networks. I worked in Novell network operating system for years, and it literally, the network operating system, when you logged in as a network admin, your network actually looked like a tree when you looked at it. And so it made it really easy to explain that. Microsoft doesn't do that. You know, you'll see diagrams of that, and you know, like when we did that first week or two diagram where you guys did we looked at the different tree and the different, how many computers and stuff, we went over that. But it's a theoretical thing in Microsoft, and Novell actually used it when you managed it in the network operating system. So at the bottom here talks about the tree is logically representative of multiple hierarchical levels within a directory, and you've got root, branches, and leaves. The root you can add to, the branches you can add to, the leaves you can't add to. Okay, they're the final part in that. So here's a pretty good diagram of what we just talked about. So starting with the root would be like RVC, the OU, the multiple branches, student, faculty, and we'll put over here security, maybe maintenance, okay? And these containers can add other subcontainers, which they do here. And these leaf objects will be referring to as users, and I'll put some over here, file servers, switches, printers, so you get the gist. And so when you're putting together a network, before you actually configure anything in Active Directory, you use a tree like this to configure your network, basically, on who's going to go, what group's going to be created, what rights are going to have. So it's kind of a visual representation of the actual network that you're going to be building, using the tree structure, which helps visually when you're building. So LDAP, before installing network operating system, you plan your tree. And LDAP is important because it needs to know your tree, because it has to understand your tree to understand the schema for your login and authentication, because it's vital to authentication. And you want to spend time thinking about it, because you don't want to create a tree structure that makes no sense. Like you wouldn't want to create like a container that's, you know, just a number like 1, 2, 3, 4 or something. You wouldn't want that. It wouldn't make any sense. A meaningful name, like generally most IT departments, it'll be like a department name or department acronym or something that they'll use for that. So an example here gives is also considering future needs. You'll see in a tree a lot of times when you're drawing the diagram, a dot, dot, dot over to the right, and some future type of things like future installations, future users, things like that. This example here gives us Circuits Now, a new manufacturing firm that would become the OU, or the root, and that would be the beginning, at least, of that tree, would be the OU or the root. So the example here, it gives Circuits Now, some printers, users, and computers, which every company's going to have. But on the right, you'll notice it adds in some future stuff with the dots there and the dashes. It adds maybe a circuits or chips area, and then maybe transistors area in the future. And this is important when you're dealing with finance and you're wanting to buy servers and architecture now for the next 5 years. So this might be the next 5 years possible. Just say for argument's sake it's the next 5 years. So because of that, I'm going to need more memory, maybe another server. The second server we won't be using right now, but we're going to buy it now, because just like everything in IT, everything gets more expensive as time goes on. And so buy it now, duplicate what you need, hold off on it. A lot of times you can store it, it's not going to hurt it to have it, and be ready for that future installation. So sharing applications, one of the ways you can, in IT, you're having to constantly do, we just went through this locally this last couple weeks, this month, is upping licensing, re-upping licensing. And when you're buying software licensing through whatever vendor it might be, we'll say Microsoft, Adobe, well, those are the top two that every company's going to have to buy pretty much. Or you have a per user license, a per seat license, or a site license. Now, depending upon your company size, it depends greatly on cost. So it would be overkill for some companies to get site license if they only have 5 people, right? But if you have 500 people, site license might be the best way to go. Now, if you say you have 50 to 100 people on some of these software companies, it might be best to do like a per seat license, where you can do concurrent. I'm going to buy 10 licenses, concurrent licenses for Adobe Pro, and what that means is only 10 people can be in Adobe Pro at a time. And you look at your infrastructure and how people work, and you're like, yeah, that's going to work. That's going to function. And per user license is just what it sounds. Where you have 10 licenses, you have 10 licenses on 10 machines, and that's it. And so Adobe is smart enough, and all these other companies are smart enough to police it, usually internal, through the licensing that you purchase. And if you supersede, like the concurrent license, it'll just pop up a message to the user saying, license has been filled, please wait. Would you like to be notified when a seat comes open? Yes, and they are notified via email or something, or a prompt on their computer that they can get in. So this is a conversation you have to have with your IT department, how they're going to use software, what type of software. Microsoft Office, Adobe are the two big ones on the block that most companies have to purchase for the most part. Other ones would be a montage of different softwares, like your Exchange server. You're going to have that as well. That generally is not going to be a per user seat and site license for that one. It's a blanket cost. You are going to pay for maintenance on that though. But per seat, per user or site license deals with softwares that, another one would be Adobe Acrobat, I mentioned that, Adobe Photoshop, as an example, Quark Express, InDesign, AutoCAD, that's another one. So anything that local users use, and it's generally in the design office type of applications. When you're sharing applications, you can install an application on a server if it allows that, and you purchase appropriate type and number of licenses. You verify the resources needed, and again, this will be included in your plan for purchasing. You install it, make the application available, go through training or whatever it is you need to go through to train your folks, provide access to the user, to the application. The NOS is responsible for arbitrating file access, meaning from the Active Directory, you can give rights or not give rights to certain users to access that folder, to run that program. The problem with shared file access is multiple users simultaneously accessing the same data in the same program files. Can lock up data, lock up files, things of that nature. And you might have seen this before. An example I'll tell you is Excel, okay? If I open up an Excel document on a network, right, and I'm working on it, and then you come in and open up the same Excel document, it's going to say locked when you start making changes. As soon as you go into a cell, it's going to say locked by Chuck Conkle. Do you want to know when he's done? Yes. So that's one of the problems with shared programs or shared applications even on a network is the locking feature, simultaneously feature. So in some circles, like Adobe has a thing called shared review, meaning multiple people can work on one document and check it in, and Adobe's smart enough to put them all together into one document along with a list on the left side of the Adobe document of who made what changes at what time, and it's kind of a revision. So if you and I are working on Adobe and shared review, and we submit it, I submit mine now, you submit yours an hour from now, Adobe shared review is smart enough to revision both of those. Now, if we're working in the same area, sometimes it might need conflict resolution, and very rarely, but sometimes that happens. But again, it pops up a message saying this needs to be resolved, and you have to resolve it. So there is a problem with shared folders because of that sometimes. Shared printers. Shared printers we use all the time, right? In every business, every home. And you can install printers now. Modern printers have been able to be installed on network operating system for years now, where you literally put a folder on the server where you put all your printer queues and all your printer installations, and you can browse a folder, see all the printers, literally right-click on the printer, and add it to any client that has rights to add that printer. And then they can print from that. So that's called Print Server, which manages these print services. Printer attached directly to Print Server is convenient to convenient network location. So basically you can see queues of all the print services, who's printed what, how many pages they printed. Because a lot of places will have like departments will have to pay put in their budget so much per month on who's printed what. And so the paper and the printing costs for the ink will come out of each department depending on the usage of that printer. And that's done on a print server. All network operating systems perform common tasks in managing printers. It's pretty much out of the box, easy to do. So here's an example of some network operating system printers. And notice you've got a network printer down here directly connected to the print server, one here and one here, but all performing the same function basically. You can even, if you have an older printer that doesn't have a shared IP where they can set up it on a server, you can set it up locally on a computer and then share that on the network once it's set up on your computer. For older printers, and you maybe have done in the past, easily done. Hopefully you know how to create a printer. If you don't, I can help you, show you how to do that. Pretty easy to do. Most of the new print drivers are actually in the print queue on the server folder, and once you add it to your local computer, it'll install the drivers and everything for you. Pretty easy to do. And continue on to manage resources. There's limited server resources, so because of that, even though some servers might have terabytes of data available, it's still limited depending on how many users you have. So because of that, you have to manage it somehow. And so you can set up alerts for users to know they're coming close to their quota of size. So if you give each user, say, 500 meg quota, when they get to 400 megs, you can give them a prompt and saying, you're getting close to your quota, please clean out. You can customize the message however you want to in your network operating system. Modern network operating systems allow you to add in boatloads of memory, processors, bus, hard drive use, additional hard drives, SCSI drives, mirror drives, where basically you have, an example would be a RAID type of server, hardware, to where you're RAIDing together your hard disk. Say you have 10 hard disks and 5 of them are rated to another 5, and what's happening is basically you're just mirroring, 5 is mirroring the other 5. So if one fails, you're not going to lose data. You do have redundancy, but almost every network operating system is going to have a rated type of hard drive system. And rated hard drives, SCSI hard drives, are usually more expensive. One of the big ones on the block that's coming up that you might have heard of, some of you might have laptops like this already and desktops, is solid state drives. Solid state drives are really common now because they're low heat, they last longer, and they're getting more reasonable to purchase, the high-end ones. And even those you can set up for RAID. RAID is available not only in network operating systems, but it's also available even on normal clients. You can set up a RAID system, a RAID hard drive system in any client computer as well, just through the normal Windows operating system managing of hard drives. Memory, you have virtual memory, and you have physical memory. Virtual memory can boost total memory available. Physical memory is literally the chips you have in your on your actual processor, on your actual motherboard. The physical memory required by the server varies by what you're running on that server. An example, Microsoft Exchange, modern version, latest version, requires about 12 gigs of memory if you're just having that only on the server. That's it, nothing else. And generally for Exchange, and a lot of other softwares, you only have one server for that software. Exchange is, as you can imagine, used a lot because it's all the email clients or all the email for the customers and the employees. And with spam the way it is, not about 90, I think the last stat I read was 95, 96, 97% of all emails coming into your corporate office are spam. And it goes the same for your personal email as well. So what that means is, on an average day for a business of, say, 500 employees, you're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of spammed emails that could be potentially coming in on a daily basis. And so it's a lot of processing. So only one server generally is needed for that, dedicated for that, but needs a lot of memory. Then the last one's virtual memory is stored on what's called page files. And page files, you've seen this maybe on your system, can be quite large. A page file is basically managed by the operating system. You don't manage it yourself. And it's literally a file that's full of history of where you've been, what you've done on your computer. It's pointers to everything you do all the time. And it makes things faster. So when you log into your computer, if you normally open up this program and go here and go there, that's all going to be over time on a daily basis put in that page file to where it's accessing that all the time to make things faster for you. And again, it can grow even on your local computer. If you look at the local C drive, it's usually in the root, the page file is. It can be on average 2 gigs easy, a page file is. And basically what a paging does is it says on the last, it moves blocks from that file, from RAM into virtual memory. So it goes right from that page file file into virtual memory immediately. So as soon as you log in, everything in that page file system or in that page file goes into virtual memory immediately. So it doesn't have to remember where things are at, it knows because of the page file. So if you ever wondered what that page file is, it's pretty important. And it does help with speed and it does help with processing power because it's everything's pointed in that page file to what you normally do. Virtual memory advantages is it easily expanded, memory available to server apps. Because if you right-click on any executable in your computer at home or even on a server, you can right-click on it and tell how much memory you want allocated to that executable. Now, by default, it's going to be whatever the programmer created it to be, but you can override that. And so sometimes you might have to do that on some softwares. It's engaged by default on virtual memory to where if it sees a file or a program needs more memory, it'll give it more memory. Windows will naturally give it more memory. But also on the flip side, virtual memory disadvantage, it slows things down. Because if virtual memory being turned on, which it is by default, the hard drive is accessed to circumvent the lack of physical memory. And it's making it, so virtual memory is a compilation of hard drive space, physical memory to beef up your virtual memory. Okay? So you have 12 gigs of RAM and you're running at 10 gigs right now in whatever processor you have. Virtual memory will take, say, 500, 2 gigs, whatever it needs, add it to your memory to make virtual, but it's accessing that hard drive every time it uses it for that virtual memory, which means it's going to slow down your processing, slow down your speed. And this even happens in your home computer too, by the way. So I always tell students if they're running slow on their computer, what are you running in the background? What's running right now? When you start up, before you start any program, look and see in your startup menu what's starting up in your startup menu, because a lot of that stuff you can actually get rid of. Be careful because you don't want to get rid of stuff you don't want to get rid of, like you don't want to get rid of antivirus starting up, you don't want to get rid of stuff like that. But do you need, a music player that you never use hardly to start up every time? No, because when you start it up, it's using processing power. And so same thing with servers. Over time, you do have to look in that startup menu to see what's being used now, what's not being used. And again, over time, you get to know what's what. And I think I mentioned this a while back, when you're working on computers, same thing with memory here and with what we're talking about. I take a picture, too, of my startup menu before I change anything. Because if I screw up and I realize I did something wrong, I can go back to that picture and put back what I took out of that startup menu, which sometimes has happened in the past. So take a picture, or you can do a screenshot, either one, before you make any changes. Lastly, multitasking. When it comes to servers and network operating systems, multiple tasks can happen at one time all the time. And it doesn't mean performing more than one operation simultaneously. Basically, it's quickly. All things are done quicker in multitasking. It can be done simultaneously, but it doesn't mean that all the time. It just means things can be done quicker, in appearance of it being simultaneously, but it's not. It's actually done one at a time. Everything in computers is done one at a time. It might look like it's the same, but it's not. It's all done one at a time. So to do multiprocessing, Basically, it's a routine of sequential instructions that literally runs over and over again every, millisecond, millions of times over and over again in your computer. And you look at it and go, oh, it's multitasking. But it's actually doing one thing at a time, over and over again, in an iterate loop, basically. And that's where threading comes in, because threading basically allows you to take all the processes and procedures and put it into one thread for your system to continually loop over and over again. And then, so instead of 1,000 iterations, it's looking at what iteration within that iteration of that thread, though, is 1,000 iterations. But it's only having to manage one thread. So, with that said, I'm going to stop this.